Some people swallow the universe like a pill. They travel on through the world like smiling images pushed from behind. The universe lies before you on the floor, in the air.
Ralashia said I like option 1 but maybe sort of make like a reverse of 2. So we're continuing this epic story while also still doing normal delivery.
The grand show is eternal. Universe. Some people swallow the universe like a pill. They travel on through the world like smiling images pushed from behind. The universe lies before you on the floor, in the air, in the mysterious bodies of your dancers, in your mind. From this voyage, no one returns poor or weary. The grand show is eternal. The universe.
Hello, and welcome. Today is, let me switch over to the appropriate screen. Yay, it's code. For those of you who like code, it's code. For those of you who hate code, I'm sorry, it's code. Let's see, I could probably set up the Kono cam because he's being, let's see, hold on, let's see. Add. Video capture. Kono cam. And hold on, let me loosen it. I can give it an angle. Oh, we got a birthday coming. Yay, Carly. Happy birthday. There we go. All right. So we got a Kono, we got a trolley cam. I'll put the trolley cam up there. And add text. Roll a cam. There we go. Skazam. What's that? It's the trolley cam. Cody never got banned. Nope. No banning on that one. Cody was talking to himself. There was a timeout message maybe, but there was maybe a request, but no. Look at my cat. This is what my cat does. Okay, so yes, so today is game development. We are working on a game which is codenamed The Campaign. And it's codenamed that because it is a web-based role-playing game where everyone gets to pick a side. You pick a political party. The political parties are absolutely unrelated to what's going on. In the actual political world, they are very much based off of just randomness. So it's not really about politics. It's not a game about politics. It's a game about choice. And I'm sorry, my glasses are terribly, terribly, terribly off color. Or dirty. That's the word I'm looking for. So yes. So you pick a political party that you wish to support. Then you pick a job. And then you go through a bunch of different scenarios, so you pick a bunch of different. You have a bunch of scenarios and situations that either are brought to you, or you get to choose from, and then from there, you develop a character and that you build a following, and that following then helps your party. And at the end of the campaign trail, so I'm not sure if it's going to be 1 or 3 months yet, we kind of have to see how that pans out, but at the end of all of that, a winner is chosen. So there's a winning party and there's a winner, an overall winner. The winning party, everyone gets a bonus. And the winner gets to choose. Let me just get rid of the trolley cam. It's not necessary. And the winner gets to choose a rule change. And basically that is, some aspect of the game is going to change. So it's kind of like changing laws. It won't be a major thing. It won't be like, oh my God, the game is now unplayable. It'll just be that, now if you get caught for this, you do. Yeah, I'm not sure yet. We haven't quite gotten that far. So we figured we've laid down the basics. The code is actually available. It's all online. The game will be playable and online hopefully very soon. Right now, we are almost done with character creation. So my hope today is to finish character creation, set up the basic UI so that it is playable, and set up the basic concept for having a scenario and having your events so that we can start filling in that data. So that is the goal, and that is what I am working on. And yeah. So that is what we're working on, and today we will be working a lot in JavaScript. We'll be working a lot in the backend in PHP, and maybe doing some styles in HTML and CSS. So yeah, so let's take a look and see where we were, and let's go to Firefox, and hold on, I just have a message to handle. Okay. All right, so let's just reload. Ooh, server has gone away. Let's see why that is. See if the server is up. Server is there. Let's see if the database is there. Let's just make sure that everything's okay before we continue. Why can't I find the database? I'm looking for the campaign. There it is. Okay, so everything should be there. Well, no, this should be a proper error. I'm very happy this is here. This very much should be here. The server going away is a bad thing. So why? Let's see. What am I trying to connect to? Let me just quickly see what's going on. I did make a minor change, which shouldn't have mattered here. Let's do that. Maybe that changes. Okay, so something happened there. No problem. I will see what's going on at some point. Well, I like to have errors displayed during the development process on the screen, because one, people can copy paste them when they actually encounter them, so I don't have to dig through the server logs, and it also helps me when I'm, I really don't want to have a full back-end management system for tracking errors with a code like this. It's just completely overkill. Creative, thank you so much for the hosting. Also, Rail, thank you so much for the hosting, and everybody else who hosted there. All right, so what did we get to so far? So we have email create. You know what? Let me just delete all the fake users I created. All right, so we'll delete all them. Okay. So we have... this is extremely embiggened. This is significantly larger than it should be. In fact, if I do Control 0, so this is the size things normally will be. I'm making them bigger so that they are significantly easier to see. So we have an I agree to terms of service. And then we create an account. So now we have selecting the parties. We haven't really styled this. Ignore the giant green button. But you pick the party. You're in the kumquats, the cupcakes, the cookies, or the goobers. And so you take a look and you pick. And so let's say we're just going to take the cupcakes. Then you have a stat screen where you're picking your stats up to 16 points. I'll need some sort of messaging on that. So let's play someone who's a little bit of everything. There we go. Okay. And you can continue. And then you pick a job. And very similar to the other things, you select and it highlights. So you pick a job and it'll tell you what that job is. We will be a reporter to start. Why not? And this is, I believe, where we left off. So if I click continue on here, it shouldn't do anything. Okay, so now we have to see what we're doing next. So I'm going to go back to code. All right, so if we go back to code now, I don't need to have that open. Don't need to have, okay, so job selection. So the last place we were, so this is our JavaScript for job selection. This font size should be viewable. If you're on mobile, it's probably going to be a little tight, but I'm not terribly concerned. You shouldn't be developing on mobile. But it'll give you an idea of what's going on. All right, so what we need to do is no, creative, you have not told me about the future. I would love to hear about the future. So let's see. So where did we leave off? So yes, very much Rail. Everything will be responsive. Right now we're getting all the code functional. So, so we have our button, which I'm pointing at here. So we need to give our button something to do. So we're going to go into our job selection. So we have our job selection continue button. So after that is loaded, so after the job selection is loaded, we need to give that a job select.continue, click function. All right, so as we've said, we do an ID selector. So this is selecting the unique button. The ID is job selection continue. And we were adding a click. So it's click or tap function. And what we're going to do is call this function, which is our next sign up step. So next sign up step. So this is going to, again, call this function that we're in right now. It's going to increase the value of sign up step by 1, which is what the ++ does. And then that's going to see what we need to do. So on case 3, which was step 3, was pick a job. So step 4 is the tutorial and the first thing. So the first thing we're going to want to do is what we've done everywhere else, is we're going to want to take our full width and hide it. So the full width is, if I go back here, so the way we have this laid out is there's essentially 3 sections to this page. There's a left side, a right side, and then a full width section. And as we need them for the UI, we show them and hide them and fill their content. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to drastically limit the amount of things that we're styling. It allows us to focus very heavily on ensuring that stuff works. And it also ensures that all the new content we create is utilizing everything that we possibly can, and it's utilizing existing UI infrastructure. So yes, so that's the goal. So in this case, what I would like to do for our first scenario. So the way we wanted sign up to work, and as you kind of walked through, is step 1 is your basic information. Step 2 is pick your party, which we had. Step 3 is pick your stats. Step 4 is job selection. And the last step is basically it is going to be a tutorial. So is a tutorial. So the tutorial is going to be getting people through their first scenario. So while technically this might be extremely easy to code, this is going to be a lot of code because this is the first laydown of the game that we have. And this is going to be the first. Sorry, my kitty's being very cute. There you go, for everybody who wants the kitty cam. So yes. So that is kind of how we want to focus on that. So the real question is, how do we want to set up our actual game? And really, it comes down to what is going to happen. My normal standard dealing for a game, and I probably even want to set up a few new sections in here. So if I bring my index up, which is my main page, so I have my left side and my right side. I'm gonna, you know what? Left side and right side is probably not. It's left side half, right side half. That's probably what I want. Let's rename these left side half, right side half, side. Okay, so that's the only place we have it, right side. Okay, all right. Okay. So now we're going to come here. So we have left side half, right side half. We need to change the CSS. So left side half and right side half. Okay. So I'll make that bigger so you guys can see. All right. So we've now fixed that. And by fixed, I mean we've just kind of made it more verbose, which is always better. All right, so our game board consists of a heading, a left side half, a right side half, a full width, and then what we're going to want, so I'm going to put in a clear both in there. And the bottom is we're going to have a div ID is left side small and div ID right side large. So the way this is going to work is really I'm setting the game area. Rail, we're just getting started. So this is the fourth session, fourth stream of this. The first stream was just concept design, so figuring out what it is we wanted to build. The first one, the first coding stream, so stream 2, was building the user object so we could create. Then the third stream was actual account creation, so being able to create a new account and create a new user. And now we are actually starting to get into the meat of the code, and the meat of the actual game, I should say. And I'm kind of spacing out. The UI is by no means final. I'm putting together a functional UI but it is one that I very much hope to get to later. My hope is to get the game fully functional first, and then from there edit as necessary and rework as necessary and figure all that stuff out. Okay, so by adding in this, the left side small and left side large, this gives us the ability to have a sidebar. So left side small and right side small. So now I'm adding the CSS for these. So float left width is going to be 25%, make it 20, and float right width is going to be 76%, because I'm going to leave some padding between them because I don't want them smacking into each other. So what this allows is to have a left side and a right side, very similar to pretty much how, I mean, if you take a look at even the way PHP Storm works. Over here in the corner, we have all our code and things like this. This is our menu bar, so to speak, and this is the meat. This is what you really care about. And this also allows us later on to even have a toggle button, so it's like, no, I don't even care, put this stuff away. So we can focus on all of that stuff. So that's what I'm doing here. So really I'm just setting up UI concepts so that I can later on turn them on and off, and use them as necessary. So in all these sign up steps, so now we've finally gotten to the end. So the full width, we're going to want to actually go away. So full width hide. And then we're going to want to left side small show. So we're going to show the left side, and left side, or right side large dot show. All right, so now we are showing. So these would originally be invisible elements. So if I go back here, right now we do not see that, but I will start style display none. So display none means visually these HTML elements will be not displayed. They will simply act as if they were not there at all. What show and hide do in JavaScript, or at least the jQuery versions of these, is actually toggles that ability. So it toggles whether or not the item is shown, is display none, or display block, inline, etc., whatever it normally would be. So that is what that function is actually doing. All right, so I'm hiding the full width container, and I've got my left and my right, and I want to make them, populate them. So at this stage, normally in the game, I'm imagining the left side, and it's the left side will be your later, your menu bar. So that will have things like your in-game email. It'll have your user stats and things like that. For the sake of this, since you've just signed up, you don't have any messages waiting for you, and I also don't want to bulk up with UI. So what I'm going to use the left side for is the left side is going to be information for the tutorial. And then the right side is going to actually be the normal game stuff. So Realtia asked about I'm using PHP Storm and that he's used Notepad++. Notepad++ is a good software. There's a lot of good what they're called IDEs, which is integrated development environments. There are lots of great ones out there. PHP Storm is $100 a year, but I use it professionally, and it is worth every penny. I love it. It has some really nice features. It's built off Eclipse, so if you're familiar with Eclipse through Java or anything else, it has just very nice things that I've never seen replicated. So for me, I enjoy PHP Storm. You don't need to, you never need to, but developing with an IDE is always going to be easier than developing with just a really nice text editor. Okay. So yeah, so now what I'm going to do is what I did up here. So I'm going to use Ajax to load up my thing. So in this case, I'm going to load in my docs. I will do scenario example. So I'm going to load scenario example or scenario help. All right, so scenario help is going to be what's loaded. So we need to create this file. So docs, new file, call that scenario help.html. All right, yeah, add it to git h2, and let's scenario help. And then I will just put in a very basic paragraph. This is a scenario. Your each reaction has a different chance of success based on your skills. Also, the choices you make shape your character's future. So, if you shape your character's future, let's keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. All right. So yeah, so this is just basic. We'll work on the wording and everything later. All right. So we've got that in here. So the first thing we want to do is that. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to load. We're going to want to load the value of whatever our scenario is going to be. So we're going to use. We don't need all this stuff. This is copy pasta mess. All right, so we're going to fill in our left side. So left side small is going to get the response. Okay, so the next thing is we're going to call and try and get our response. So in this case, we're no longer calling static things. So we're no longer calling our docs. So get scenario.php. All right, so we're going to get our scenario. So what is the scenario we're going to display? And our right side large is going to get the response. My apologies. I just often need to drink. Otherwise, I can't keep talking. Hold on. Let me get caught up on chat. Yes. I mean, Eclipse and PHP Storm is wonderful for that. I know they have a single user license that might be a little cheaper. But yeah, it's autocomplete and everything is amazing. There are Eclipse plugins for PHP. The PHP Storm just happens to be one of the better ones I've used. And in my professional, when I'm doing things professionally, to toss out a few bucks to get a really good editor is well worth it for me, as opposed to spending a bunch of hours trying to find one, because it's just not worth it. Okay, so now we need to create this file, but there is one thing we need to do beforehand, because get scenario is going to be based off of the character you have and who you are. But up to this point, we haven't actually saved any of your character information. So we need to save character information. So up to this point, we saved, for example, we saved your sign-up values. So we saved the stats. So now what we're going to need to do is in our sign-up values. So when you click the job selection, we're going to .job. And we're going to take a look. So if we go to our job selection, what we want to do is we want to figure out what is the job name of that is selected. So we have a data job name. So we're going to, so just for cleanliness, job name equals, so dot, because I believe it's a class we're looking for. Yes, so it's a class sign up job dot selected. So we're looking for an element that has both the class sign up job and selected. And since they're together, that means both of them. If I did a space, that would be looking for a descendant, meaning something that was the child of something was sign up job. And if I did a comma, it would be both. So if I do them together, that means both of them, mutually exclusive. So job name is sign up job dot selected dot data job name. All right, so now at this point, I also want to see if a job was selected, because if no job was selected at this point, so if we talked about this last time, if length equals 0, let's do an if. So if there are 0 items that have this length, for now, let's just do an alert. You must select a job. Else, then we can actually continue with our code. All right, so logically walking through it, if there is at least one selected item, then if there are 0 selected items, then tell the user, hey, you have to select a job. Otherwise, if there's at least one selected item, we do this. Inversely, what we could do is, and this is probably better, if the signup_job.selected.length, so it's the amount of items that meet that criterion or query, is unequal to 1. And this is more relevant because let's just say you happen to be clicking around like crazy and your web browser's a little slow or old and you manage to select 2 items. Oops. Which one is correct? I don't know. You must select a single job. There we go. Fine. All right, so your job name is going to be your signupjob.selected and the data job name. So if you take a look back in the HTML, so the job name is your data job name right there. So we close that. All right, so our data value of job name. So from here, job name equals job name. All right, so what we're doing is we're creating, so this is an object, which we talked about last time. So this is a JavaScript object, and we're giving it a property of job name, and we're assigning it whatever the value of job name is. Now, because I said I was doing this for brevity and more just to explain it all, I now can wrap all this up and just do that and save ourselves a little line of code. Okay, so sign up values, job name, and now next sign up step. So now the next sign up step is going to run. So now the first thing we need to do is we need to save these values. So we're going to save the character information. So at this point, we're going to do another Ajax call. So Ajax and done function response. Okay. So our Ajax, or our URL is going to be API finalize user information. The name doesn't matter. I like to be verbose. I like to look at a file and say, I know what this file is supposed to do. And that way, if I also start to code and realize that I'm way beyond what this file should be doing, it gives me a chance to relax that and do something that is make a new file or kind of figure out what's best. It keeps things clean, and you really want your code to be as clean as possible, because if you can't read and edit your own code, no one else can. All right, so that gets a comma, type is going to be post. As I said, it doesn't really matter if you use post or get. Post is a little safer, so to speak, because you can have larger variables and stuff like that. It shouldn't be an issue. And then data is going to be sign up values. Okay, so now what should happen, and we'll test, is this object should get converted into JSON object notation and sent to the server, and the server can read it. So the way we're going to test that is we're literally going to take a look at Firebug, take a look at the output, see what happens, and adjust from there. So I will save. Thanks, Wanzi. All right. All right, so yeah, so now let's go to Firefox and let's give it a load again. All right, so I will put Firebug up there again. Again, I apologize, Firebug. You know what? Actually, what I can do is this. I can take Firebug and make it smaller on my screen. And then in here, hold on, I could do this. Hey, you can now see Firebug. Okay. Wonderful. Awesome. Normally before you couldn't. All right. So we'll put in, it doesn't really matter. Character name doesn't matter. Password doesn't matter. Just like life doesn't matter. All right. So now we select our party. So we'll be the goobers, and we'll continue, and we'll just give ourselves stuff. Why not? All right. So we've hit 16. Great. That works. We pick a job. All right, so now at this point, we haven't yet hit continue. So if I go to Firebug and I go to console and I do a console.log sign up values, and I run, and I take a look, maybe a little hard to see, but I see an object here, and it has, so I have my my party is goobers, so it picked that correctly, so it picked that up. I've got a stats stats object, and that stat has my charm, my creativity, my fundraising, everything else. So it has all my abilities. So far everything's storing correctly on that, which is very nice. I might need to do something called serialization to send these values, but I believe that this already happens. All right, great. So we're good so far. So we hit continue. So now, great. So our first part worked. Welcome to the campaign, scenario help. Okay, so now we need to take a look at our error. So we did get one. So let's make this even bigger. You don't need to see my face. Who needs to see my face? Nobody. All right, so finalize user information doesn't exist. Neither does get scenarios. Of course it doesn't. So let's quickly just create those and create empty files so that they at least do nothing. All right, so new PHP. So finalize user information.php. And sure, add it to Git. And then new PHP. I believe the other one was called get scenario.php. All right, so if I go to finalize user information, what I really want to do is just one thing. I want to do var dump. Oop, my apologies. We need to drop that and that. Okay, so all I did was create two new files. So I created finalize user information, which is why are you giving me red? Okay, because I haven't finished. And get scenario. So I just created the two files so that they're just empty. So all I'm going to do in here is var dump post. PHP, any files that the HTML, the web browser sends to the backend comes in one of two ways. It comes through get or post. And what those are they are a multi-dimensional array. So it's basically just a set of key value pairs where the key is the name of the variable, and then the value is the value of the variable. So pretty simple. So in this case, in our JavaScript, we said finalize user information is going to use post. So it's going to post the values. So in our PHP script, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to var dump, which basically is a variable dump. It's going to take that entire variable and just spit all of the information out. And it's going to export post. So now if I save that and I go back to Firebug, I put Firebug up here. Okay. So now one of the things, great, amazing things with Firebug that you normally cannot do is I can resend an AJAX request. So instead, hold on, let's adjust that camera so that you guys can see my cat knocking my monitors around. So instead of having to go through an entire new sign up, I can literally go right here and I can click. And if I click, it shows me, my error was not found. I can right click on here and you can't see the right click. It's not showing, but there's an option that says resend. And if I resend it and I go down here, it has now been resent. So now that did connect and I take a look and what do I see? My post array has party, goobers, stats, all my stats, job name, and my job name. So I know that the job recorded. I know that the stats recorded, and I know that the party recorded, and that is wonderful. So basically all the information we did collect got sent correctly and all of this. So now let's actually do something with that. So let's get rid of Firebug and there. All right, so now I don't need to var dump the post. Sometimes what I will do for my own sanity is if you copy and paste that output. So if you copy and paste the output and put it in a multi-line comment, this you can use as reference later. So it's like, oh man, how did I do this? How did the array look? What were the variable names? I can just quickly look at that. All right, so now if I take 2 seconds to take a sip of my drink. All right, so if I go back to create user, so what we did in create user was 2 things that are very important. One is we created the user object. Hello, Thedas, how are you? So we created a new user, and that new user got thrown into the database. So we now have a user object in the database. And the second thing we did was we created a user in the session. Now, what the session is, for those who are unfamiliar, if you're logged into a website and you stay logged in as long as you stay in your browser, but the second you go to another browser, another computer, you're not logged in. Well, what the session is a way to identify you and your browser and the server. All requests that go through the internet and all requests that you make to a website are actually done anonymously is the wrong word. They're done blanket. So it's a short-term connection. So unlike a telephone call where you pick up the phone and you call someone and there's a constant connection. So when you speak, you know exactly who is receiving that message. And when they speak, they know exactly who is receiving that message. The internet doesn't work like that. The internet, you basically, it's like sending a letter via the USPS. You just stick it in your mailbox and it goes and you hope it finds its destination. And the reality is it's only going to find a house or an apartment. Who opens it on the inside is completely up to them. So the internet, I'm not going to get too crazy into that, but yeah. But the one thing is, if you take a look at your standard envelope, you have 2 bits of information. You have a to address and a from address. And that from address, normally if you live in the United States, it's your name, your town, your city, and some your some basic stuff. When it's an internet and the browser, you have cookies, you have lots of other things that get stored that also get sent. So one of these is a special unique number. It's hexadecimal, so it's numbers and letters. But it identifies you and allows you to create a session. So really, this is an extremely long explanation for what is a session. So a session is a way to store the user so that you don't have it. And it's a good security thing, especially with a game. And it's not so much security like you can steal my password. It's security like, let's say this is a Dungeons and Dragons, and you're storing how much gold a user has. When you store that information on a server, that user would have to hack into the server and edit the data to be able to change how much gold they have. Whereas if you're saying, oh yeah, no, the server, your gold and everything can be stored on the web browser, I literally through Firebug. In fact, I'll bring up Firebug. In Firebug, I can edit my cookies right here. There's a cookies button, and it shows me, here's my PHP session ID. And it shows me that there's tracking pixels. And I literally can go in here and edit any data I want that is on my that's on my side. So when you're doing a game, you want as much information stored on the server as possible in the session so that the user is never, one, tempted to edit things, and two, if they try, it's just not going to work. So we created this user object in the session, and the user allows us to do a bunch of wonderful things. So in this user object, which we created in the first session, so we have a constructor which creates them, and we have create user. So now we're going to fill in this a bunch. Okay, so hold on, let's finalize user information. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to require includes.php. And let me just make sure that's what we were calling it. No, dot. Okay. All right. So as a reminder, so what I like to do is I create one file called includes.php, and that handles including all of the necessary libraries for the game or the application to run. So in this case, if I load up my includes right now sets error reporting to all. So that allows me, any error that comes out, I get notified, I get to see it. And that helps me to debug issues. When things go live, you don't want errors displaying, so you just change this. Session start basically just tells the server, hey, this is an actual session, go out and create a session. I'm initializing the user object, checking the session to see if a user already exists. If they do, log them in. Well, not even log them in. If they do, just load it into memory. I'm including my server configuration. I'm including my database utility. I'm initializing the database under the database variable. And then I'm including the user object, because if I don't include it, I can't use it. So that's really all is in the includes. So yeah. All right. So now we finalize. So we require includes. All right. So now we have access to the session. So user, let's see. So if is not is set user. Okay. So I'm just going to do a basic check here. Is set checks to see if the variable in question has either been loaded into memory or has a non-null value. Null is a term for nothing. It has absolutely no value. So it's not a value of 0, it's a value of nothing. So if I go back to my includes just to check, nope. That's my includes. So if I go back to includes and I take a look, I am setting user initially to null, so I'm at least identifying it, but as nothing. And if it exists in the session, then load it. All right, so if there is no user set, then what I want to do is I'm going to echo no user cannot finalize. Okay, so I am outputting to the browser. Echo says output this to output this. That's it. Output this to the console. No user cannot finalize. In fact, what I'm going to do is die. So PHP has 3 ways to exit a script. One is to just finish it. So PHP will run from the top to the bottom in order. And when it hits the bottom, it's done. If it hits a die statement, it will just ignore all the code after it. So if their user object isn't set, just die. And the other is exit. I like die because, I don't know, there's just something satisfying about killing something. And code can get frustrating at times. So killing your code is just, I don't know. It's 3 letters instead of 4. We'll go for efficiency. That works. Efficiency. Okay, so now we need to do something. So the first thing we need to do is we need to save the party. Then we're going to save the job. Save the job and save stats. Okay, so now let's start with saving the party. So let's go back to our user object. So in our user object, zoom out just a tad. Okay, so our user object, we have a value called party, and it's a party ID. And right now, we have a party name. So what we're going to need to do is a few things here. So we're going to need... All right, I have too many things open. Let me close them so that I'm a little bit more organized. There we go. Okay, so finalize user is here, and create user can go away. All right, user's here. Okay, so we've create user, so I'll put it down here. So public function set party. Okay, now I have 2 options for party. If it is a party ID, if it is a party name. Okay. So, param party int or string party ID or party name. Okay. So now, in fact, you know what? I'm going to do? I'm going to do this the right way. We're just going to call it party ID. All right. So what this means is I need to change in my docs. I need to go back to party. Is it here? Party description. Okay. So party descriptions. So I stored it like this. Now that we know it works, let's do this. So let's go to our database. So let's go back to Firefox. All right, so users, I should still be logged in. Okay, so we're going to create a new table. So if I go to my database, create a new table, we will call this parties. And I'll just do 10 because let's start. All right, so party ID. And so there's a lot of different theories as to what is the right way to create keys, what is the right way to do uniqueness and things like that. The way I like to do it is every table should have, there's 2 types of tables. There's tables that store database data and tables that store relations and relationships. If it's a data table, it should have a unique ID that should be very similar to the name of the table. So the name of our table here is parties, which you can't see because I have a the cam here, but this is the parties table. So the data elements in it are parties, P-A-R-T-Y, so they're party. A single party is a row, and the party will have a party ID. If it's a relationship, so let's say a user can have multiple parties, which is not the case in this, but let's just say it is. In that case, you'd have a relation database that only has user ID and party IDs, and that would be the unique ID. That wouldn't need a relationship ID. So yeah, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. So yeah, so this is going to be an integer, which is basically a number from 0 to 2 billion, plus or minus. I'm not going to default it. Don't need anything spells. This is going to be an index. It's going to be a primary index. Primary means it is the highest priority. And it also means you can only have one primary index. And AI stands for you can't see the AI. Let's just drop the cam for Kono cam for 2 seconds. AI means automatically increment or auto increment. So that means that every time I insert a new one, it's going to give it a new ID. In this case, there's only going to be 4 or 5 IDs, so it's not going to be a problem. We can do it manually, but you normally want to auto increment. So we're going to have a party ID. We're going to have a party name, which is going to be a varchar, which means a variable set of characters. I can choose a character set. For those who are familiar with the different character sets, you guys can't see drop downs. I can choose anything from ASCII to binary to UTF-8 to UTF-16 to UTF-8 Estonian to UTF-8 Romanian to Unicode. I normally just by default use UTF-8 General. That allows a wide range of character sets and languages, and that's fine for me. So I chose UTF-8 General. So you have a party name. A varchar requires you to have a maximum length. It used to be 255 was the maximum length period, but the more recent versions of MySQL and most databases either have a varchar 2 or have just modified varchar to allow, I think it's 512 or 5,126 or 128, some 5,000 plus things. So in this case, I can have a party description. I'm going to use text. Text is a blob. It actually, if you're having a huge database and it's going to be hundreds of thousands of rows, do not use text. I'm using it because this is going to have 4 rows in it, 5 rows in it. I could just care less, and I don't want to have to worry about limiting my description to 512 characters or 124. It's just not going to happen. All right. So we have party name, we have party description. I'm thinking at this moment, is there anything else we need on a party? Probably not. We will add things later, I'm sure, but for now, that's all we need. So let's save. So it's going to create a table. In fact, I'm going to take this. I'm going to copy. We're going to go back to here. And the one thing I forgot to do, and I'll start doing now, is new directory, and we'll call this SQL, is I will actually keep the database script for new files. So this is going to be parties.sql. So all this is copy and pasting our SQL in here so that we can recreate the database should it go away. At some point, once all our data is filled in, I will export it all and put it in there. All right, so now the next part we have, I go back to Firefox and I paste. So if I go back to Firefox, I'm just going to insert a few rows, and so we have the kumquats and kumquat description here. So we will fill that in at some later date. So we have the kumquats. We have the cupcake description here, and go and insert a new row. And then we have our last 2 parties, which is the cookies and the goobers. So cookies Cookie description here. Goober description here. Okay, so we now have our IDs. So if I go back and I go to browse, I see they're in the ID I added them. As you see, I didn't add IDs, but now they're there. So that's the auto increment going on there. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 in the order we added them, which is perfect because that's exactly what we're hoping for. So now our value is going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now, so what's good about this is now I don't have to try to determine, oh no, they're sending me a number or a letter or what. I can just assume you're sending me a party ID. In fact, I will just call it party ID. So set party ID. This up here is comment notation, which is used for your IDEs for autocomplete. So if you notice here, it says int party ID. If you probably, hold on. Let's see if you can see this. So if I do user set party, it tells me I need a party ID, and oftentimes sometimes it will actually tell you post party. It will actually tell you what the variable type is. So it's at param. It means parameter. That's why, because it doesn't match. So if I set that up, that should work now. So if I do set party, so now it's telling me party ID is an integer. So I know what I expect. So party ID. So post party. So we called it. Okay. So now one of the nice things, I can hit control and control click, and it takes me to my function. All right, so the first thing I need to do is global database. And this takes the database object that I've initialized and loads it into the global space so that I can use it within this function. Functions can only see data that is attached to the object itself and things in the global space. So then I'm going to do this party ID equals party ID. So what I'm doing is taking the object that is being associated and assigning a new party ID to it. In fact, it's called party. I don't want it to be called party, so let's call it party ID, because that makes more sense and that will be more logical, and we won't call it thinking it's a party ID. Okay. So this party is party ID is party ID. Then we need to update the database. So database, and then we're going to run a query. It's going to be update users set party ID equals this party ID, where user ID equals this user ID. So there you go. So now what's happening here? Very, very simple. Taking the value and assigning it to the object itself. So this will update it within the session. And then we're going to the database and we're updating. So this equal. So update is exactly what it sounds like. Find a row and update it. The table we're looking for is users. We're set the party ID to this party ID, so the party ID of the current object, and then where is our limiting factor. So what are the records we want to affect? We want to affect the ones where the user ID is this .user ID. So basically only update this user in the database. So later on, that's basically what you want to happen. Is this. You want the user in the session to always be up to date. And then every time there's a change, you want that change to go back to the database. So your database is your backup of that user session. So if the person's session expires or the person logs out, logs back in, or logs back in on their phone, it will check and say, oh, we don't have a user in the session. It'll go to the database and load that new exact copy. So that's really what you want to happen. Okay. So now that we've got that. Okay, so now that sets the party. Great. One thing done. All right, so finalize. So now save the job. So user set job post. And then I believe we're calling it job name. So I don't like job name. Why don't I like job name? Because job name is a name and we want IDs. So here's what we're going to do. So we're going to go back a bit and we're going to go to our job descriptions. So our job selection. So our job selection, we have politician. So we have a job name. So I'm going to do a replace. So data job name. It's going to be data job ID. We'll replace all. Okay. So that's the first change. So job name. We're going to have to rename to job ID. And then data job ID. And I think that's all. Okay. So we've just renamed a few things so that at least we're consistent. And when we look at the code, we can go, oh, that's what we tried to do. And it makes sense because making sense is good. And that's what you want to do. And that's how people can edit and look at your code and figure it out. Okay, so that's the first thing. So the next thing we're going to need to do is go back to our database. So if I go back to Firefox. Okay, so go back to our database, and we're going to want to create a new table. So this table is going to be jobs. 10. Because I just like to have enough room. So again, I like to have job ID, and it's going to be an integer. And it's going to be primary and auto increment. All right, so we're going to have a job name, varchar 255, a job description, which is going to be text. Okay, so very similar to the parties. At this stage, there's not too much different, and we're going to control all of this through other things. Great. So we save this, get this. In fact, what I'm going to do is in the SQL, I'm going to rename this. Ooh. Yeah. So I'm going to rename, so refactor, rename. You can't see this. I just renamed the parties.sql to tables.sql. So it's basically just going to be the structure. I might change this in the future, but it is what it is. All right, so now we have the creation of that. While we're at it, let's take the users object and SQL, show create table users. Show create table will show us how to create the table. So it basically gives you the code that gives you the SQL code to how to create it. So copy and paste that back. Yeah. All right, so now the user, the campaigns, and the parties, at least the tables themselves, not the data inside, all get created. And now what we want to do is go back to Firefox, and we want to fill in the jobs. So if I go back to the job selection, and I'll move that to my other screen, and let's see. Okay, all right. So let's insert. All right, so we had politician description here. TV personality description here. Go and insert. We have a campaign manager. Description here. And reporter. Description here. Oh. And then we have our last. We got thug. Thug description here. And yeah. All right, so now we have our 5 jobs in our table. And let's just make sure OBS. Yep, okay. So we have 5 jobs in the table. So now I need to go back and here. And my job ID for politician was 1. My job ID for TV personality was 2. My job ID for campaign 3 and reporter 4 and thug 5. So there we go. So now instead of sending that I'm a TV reporter, I am now sending the job ID 4 or 5 or whatever, which is actually better because computers like that kind of stuff. Hyper, thank you so much for the follow. I greatly appreciate that. All right. So now we're going to go back and if I take a look, okay, so set job, which hasn't been set up yet. So let's go to set party. So set job is going to be almost the same thing, right? Okay. So I just copy pasted because, I mean, really, it's set job. It's a job ID. Job ID, in fact. Set job ID, where user ID. Okay. So job ID, job ID, job ID, job ID. And then here we have a job. I don't want that. I want a job ID. And you're going to be 0. Same thing with the party ID. I guess no, you know what? I won't initialize. So then here we have job. Do I even set the job? No. So we don't even set the job at this point. And here we do set a job ID, but I believe we set that to 0. Okay, so now we're updating the job. So the job is getting set up. Great. All right, simple, easy, that should be working. Okay, so now we want to finalize the last, save the stats. So there's a few ways we could do this. Sorry, I'm just adjusting because I'm comfortable. I have terrible posture and I'm just never comfortable sitting this long. All right, so saving our stats. So if I take a look, our stats is a multi-dimensional array. Well, it's an array of, strength, creativity, stealth, investigation, charm, fundraising, intimidation, and manipulation. So we have a few ways of doing this. One is to do each individual stat by itself, like this. That would be lots of code. Processing-wise, really wouldn't matter, although what would matter is the biggest performance hit you're going to have in code like this is hitting the database. And the reason is every bit of data you want to send has to create a connection, it has to send data, and then it has to wait for a response. So even if you're literally saying, 100 bytes of data, you have to wrap that in actually a few thousand bytes of data to give it all the appropriate headers. You have to create that connection, that server. So there's just so much. So ultimately you want as minimal database calls as possible. Considering that the party and the job are different, I did want to make sure that they're separate enough. But the stats, we can change all at once, because even though they are going to change individually, we might as well try and save them all at once. So in this case, I'm going to do user update stats and then post stats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function, update stats, and it's going to take an array, and that array is going to be a stats array with the name and the new value I want it to be. So go here. Hello, Morgan Jerome. How are you? All right, so if I go to my user object, do I have it still open? Yes. Okay, so public function update stats, and then stats array. And then if I do a double, so stats array is an array, key value of stat and value. I'm doing well. Getting progress. Hopefully this game will be playable soon. That's the hope. All right, so we have to global DB. So we have to, because we're going to be accessing the database at some point. So what we want to do is limit our query. So ultimately at the end, we're going to DB query. We're going to update users set something values where user ID equals this user ID. Okay, so this values, let's set here, values equals array. Okay, so all right, so let me, for now, Slacker King, thank you so much for the follow. Greatly appreciate it. All right, so I am going to leave this blank for now. Blank for now. I realize it's bad. That's okay. All right, so ultimately what I really want to do is go through all of the stats that are sent and update those stats. So this basically becomes a very useful function. So let's just say I want to increase one stat, or I want to change one stat, or I want to change all the stats. This allows me to do that very easily. All right, so the first thing I'm checking very quickly is yes. So the stat names that we have, yes, that is Carl Sagan, who lets you know that you are awesome. So the stats are all named appropriately. And so we're getting in here, we actually do have an array, which is the stat names and the values. So I don't even need this, in fact. Or do I? No, I don't, because I've got integers. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to build this whole blank for now. I want this to look like, so in this case, we are passing this data. So I realize this is getting ugly, but so yeah, so I want this to look like strength equals 4, creativity equals 8, stealth equals 4, ... Okay, so that's the way I want it to look. All right, so I am going to need to do values. Okay. So what I want to do is go through this array. So for each stats array as key value val. Okay. So what for each is doing is exactly what it sounds like. For each value of this array, stats array, run this function. So run everything that I have between the braces. Key is the name of the key. So in this case, key would be strength and val would be 4. So the key is strength, the val is 4. So now if I wanted to say, so values, yeah, I'll make this an array. Okay, so values, double braces equals in PHP as append, so is key equals val. Okay, so in this case with the first key, so it's key is key, val, so key is strength, val is 4. So it's adding an array item that is now key, strength, equals 4. So now let's also put a little safeguard in here. If val, if is numeric, all right, hold on, is numeric, val. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm just doing a check to make sure that the value is numeric. And the reason for this is if I don't have a numeric value in SQL, it will fail. So if I say, if, strength equals 4, this is okay. If I do strength or name equals Bob, not okay. But if I do name equals Bob, okay. So if you have a number, it won't try and do anything with it. It'll just be like, oh, okay, I've got a number, so I'm going to assign this as a value. When you have any sort of characters or names, this is going to assume it is some sort of MySQL or some sort of SQL name. So name is the name of a field. So I'm saying the field name is equal to Bob. So in this case, because I've wrapped it in single quotes, then it makes it okay. So I'm checking to make sure there's a numeric value coming in. Otherwise, this query is going to fail. The second reason I'm doing it is a common hacking method is called SQL injection. And that's when someone basically adds in SQL into your code that you didn't put in there. So let's say I was originally going to do, name equals Bob. So they might do, instead of that, name equals Bob, haha, I'm SQL injecting you, blah. So what they would do is this would be the value of what they put in there. And I'll ignore that one. And in here, they can put malicious SQL code and potentially harm your app. At this stage, MySQL, PHP, so many ways it actually will not let you do that, or at least be offensive. Most of the times it'll just cause things to break and crash. So it's not a big issue, but what this little bit of code is just making sure that only numbers and numbers can actually be SQL injection. So it's just a little bit of safety being put in there. Okay, so now I have an array. So I'm in the right direction, but I'm not fully there. So now I have an array of key equals value. The problem is I need them to be comma separated list for the values here. So what I'm going to do is PHP has two really, really, really useful functions called implode and explode. Explode takes a string and turns it into an array. So for example, apples, bananas, grapefruit. So if I do this, explode on comma, apples, bananas, grapefruit, I actually get an array with apples, bananas, and grapefruit. But I can go the other way and I can implode. So I can implode on comma, my array, and I get exactly the same thing back. So it's extremely useful in that sense. So I'm taking an array and I'm putting a comma between each one of the values. Very, very, very useful. So that's what I'm going to do here. So implode on comma. Hold on. Yep. So it's the glue and then the pieces. So the glue is going to be a comma and the pieces are values. All right. Now the last thing I need to do is just a quick check. If count values greater than 0. All right. Now there's two reasons for doing this. One is, let's say the user only submits to update strength, but for whatever reason, strength didn't get set correctly and it's a string. So strength equals FIVE, 5. What would happen is this would have values being equal to nothing. So this would just say update user set where, and that would cause MySQL to crash. So at least in this case, it's like, okay, we're just not going to set anything. So that's what the count is checking out. So that's it. So yeah, so now this, in theory, we can have a million different stats, and it will now set and save all of them. So yeah. So great. So now that we've used this, now that we've got this, let's get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. All right, so here is what we need to do. All right, so we're setting the party, we're setting the job, we're updating the stats. And now, just for good measure, what we're going to do is session user equals user. So if you're using the canned Apache session, which is most likely what you're using if you're using a LAMP stack and just basic Apache with PHP, then the session is literally just a file on a server. Each session has its own file, and it's just a unique file name based off of the hash that's passed. So really what this is doing is saying, all right, make sure you write back the user to the session to make sure you have all the updates. Because of the way it's set, if I'm correct, in the includes, I'm using @ which means you're instead of copying the value and creating two instances of the value, you're actually directly relating to that. So it's basically just a shorthand as opposed to duplicating the value. So I shouldn't have to do this, but I'm doing it just for sanity, because I know if it doesn't work, then I'll kick myself. All right, so here is where I was. All right. So yes, so we now update all this stuff. So we have a full, complete user that is both in the database and in our session and ready to go. So now we can actually do the next section, the next set of things, which is the meat, the fun part, the actual game. All right, so if we take a look, the first thing we did was we did an AJAX finalize the user information. So if I take a look here, I might actually output information. No user cannot finalize, in which case that's good information to give to the user. So in this case, if response in equal to empty string, then alert response. We'll do something a little cleaner at some point in the future, but at least for now, if there's an error, throw it. Otherwise, don't. Let's just make sure there's no extra blank lines. Okay, there's nothing else going to throw. Let's make sure there's no spaces after that. Okay, good. All right, so now we're going to go down the rest. So we're hiding our full width version. We're loading only our small logo. And in fact, if I go back to Firefox and we look, that's what we have here. So this is our left-hand menu, is the scenario help. And then in the right-hand menu, which will load once we're done, is going to load all of the actual code. So now we need to go back here and we need to take a look. So what are we doing? So the left side is just loading the scenario help, and the right side is loading get scenario. So get scenario is getting your first scenario. All right. So, and we're going to load the response into right side large. Okay, so get scenario.php finalize should be done. Hopefully we don't have to load it again. It's pretty simple. All right, so get scenario. So this is in the APIs doc. So let's require includes.php. So we want to include everything. End our file. All right, so really let's use comments, because this is a file that's going to actually do a lot. The last one ran 3 functions. It was really simple. So let's really comment this out. So the first thing we're going to do is check the database for an existing uncompleted scenario for this user. If no uncompleted scenarios, see if the user has already completed a scenario for the day. So the way scenarios are going to work is scenarios are going to be daily events. So every day you get one daily event that comes to you that you have to decide how you want to react. And then there's a second aspect to the game, which is events. Events you get to drive. So you control everything. You pick how you want to do the event and everything else. Events can be done multiple times. You can do multiple events per day. Those will be turn-based and things like that. So when all is said and done, scenarios are a once-a-day thing and a fairly unique and fairly big thing. Events are smaller, and the more you play, the more you'll be able to kind of do with things. So that's just some background behind what a scenario is. So if no uncompleted scenarios, see if the user has already completed. So we're not just building this for the tutorial. I am building the entire scenario generator. So when the user says, give me my scenario for the day, I want to, one, hey, have we assigned you one manually, which is, or automatically daily, which is what's going to be 99% of the cases. If we haven't, let's make sure that you, let's make sure you've completed yours today. If you have, then we'll tell you that. And then if you haven't completed one and haven't gotten one, let's give you a new one, so that all is well and you actually have something to complete. Okay. So if completely new user, create a scenario for them. All right. So clearly we're not going to have, so let's see. So scenario check is db query 1. Query 1 just basically gives the first result. So db query 1, select scenario ID from scenarios where user ID equals user ID and status equals 0. So ultimately, I imagine there's really going to be two statuses, 0 and 1. 0 is you've completed it, or maybe 0, 1, and -1. 0 is it's outstanding. -1 means you didn't actually participate in it. And then 1 is you did participate in it. So at least for now, I will do that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do something I don't always do. I'm going to create a new file in the configs, and we're going to call this static. Hold on. We're going to call this reference. There's. Okay. Don't need that. All right. So our reference variables is going to be basically it's just going to be an autocomplete so that we know what things are. So class. Scenario status, and then const let's see, available equals 0. Const is constant, meaning it can't be changed. Const I believe I want static. Static also means it doesn't need to be part of. So no, hold on. I'll just do regular const, and that should be okay. Available, completed, and incomplete equals -1. All right. So why am I doing this? Let me show you. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my includes. I'm going to include config reference I called it reference vars. So I don't often do this, but it actually really makes code more readable. So it's not a bad thing at all to do. Okay, so now that I've included that, incompleted, that's fine. All right, so if I go to my get scenario, so right now I just say if status equals 0. 0 is not helpful. What does 0 mean? Well, if I do, let's see, scenario status, and then you can't see the autocomplete, but I have the choice of available, completed, incomplete. So I have available. There you go. So now if I read the code, I see select scenario ID from scenarios, where user ID is my user and status equals scenario status available. So this actually is, I mean, it's human readable. It's like, okay, give me all of the available scenarios for this user. All right, so let's check it. So if scenario check scenario ID. So if it's set, then there is an available scenario and scenario. So let's scenario equals null. All right, scenario equals new scenario. Scenario check scenario ID. So we have not created the scenario object. We will need to do that, but we can nonetheless create this. All right, so our scenario is that. Awesome. Okay. Else, if no uncompleted scenarios, so in this case it is not set, see if the user has already completed a scenario for the day. So has completed. Oh, no. All right, so very similar. So we're doing another check. So scenario check, where status equals completed and let's see, scenario date equals date today. All right, so a date. So basically, if it's today, if it has a date of today, and it has something completed, then that should be good. All right, so we're gonna do something very similar. So if scenario check, so is set, scenario check scenario ID, then, so in this case, if there is something set, what we want to do is we want to die. And before dying, we want to JSON encode an array, and it's gonna say errors, or probably better, how do I want to do this? So it's just, for now, we'll just say h2 no new scenarios for today. Okay, great. So in this case, just quickly reading through it again. So we're going to our database. We're giving a single query asking for the scenario ID of a scenario where the user so it's the user ID. The status is completed, and the scenario date is today. So that, so that's that. So we can assume now at this point so we have two situations. So we have a scenario already exists and we've loaded it, or a scenario doesn't exist and shouldn't and we've died. So if scenario I can't scenario is equal to null. All right, so if scenario is still null, oh, hold on. So this comment should be up here. Okay. Yep. Okay. So if the user has not completed, then check to see. Now, if completely new user, or they simply didn't get a scenario, create a new one for them. So give everyone a chance to actually create a scenario. And so yeah. So we're gonna have to create a new scenario. So scenario equals scenario, create new scenario, and we'll pass the user object. Okay, so now we have a bunch of, so now down here, process and display the scenario. All right, so now we need to display the scenario in all its wonderfulness. All right, so the first thing we need to do is create a scenario object. So if I go back to my objects, new PHP file, and scenario.php. Okay, so it's bigger. And the scenario object handles creation and resolution of scenarios. All right, so class scenario. It's our standard opener. And what we are doing here is creating it. So very similar to our user object. So let's, don't need the reference vars open. Okay, so very similar to the user object. We're going to have the user, we're going to define all our variables, and then we're going to have a constructor, which loads everything. So let's start with our constructor. So function constructor, construct, scenario ID. Okay, so we need to think about what sort of data our scenario ID is going to have. So var user ID, I can't type, equals 0, not set it to anything. Okay, so we're going to need a user. We're going to need a job ID. So scenarios are very job specific. So for example, if you're a reporter, you're going to get data and you're going to determine how you wish to report on it. It's not free form, so there'll be 3 or 4 different selection options. But you know, there's going to be limited options, but you know, it's that. Whereas if you are a politician, there will be, you know, information will be found out about you, and you have the option to try and pay a lot of money to suppress that information, own up to it. It's like, so depending on the different job is going to be the different scenarios you have. So it will be useful to know what job ID it was originating from. All right, so we're going to need a scenario description. In fact, we could just call it description. I'm okay with that. All right, so we're gonna have a description. We're gonna have a name. I don't know how useful I can be at coming up with unique names like that, but we'll see. Okay, so we're gonna have a description. We're gonna have a name. We're gonna have a status. We're gonna have a date. And we're gonna have options. So options is going to be an array, and that'll probably be stored in a different table, but at least we're going to have that. Okay, so the construct is you're passing an ID and saying, load me this scenario. So in this case, we're going to have to, again, global DB, load our database, and scenario info equals DB query. Select star. Star means everything, very similar to just any old, it's a wildcard. Select star from scenarios where scenario ID equals, in fact, I'm going to query 1, or scenario ID equals scenario ID. Okay. So we're going to load all that, and then this user ID equals this job ID, scenario info job ID. So what I'm doing now is taking all the information that was returned and assigning it to my object so that now I can use that information as necessary. This description equals this name equals name, this status, this date equals date, and this. All right, so now we get to the options. Load the options. So the options are going to have to get, so options equals DB query. So we're going to have to go into the database and select star from scenario options where scenario ID equals scenario ID. So what we're doing is we're going into the database and saying, give me my array of options. And then, in fact, I'll just do this. Options. There we go. All right, so I'm going to the database. So I'm making two queries. One is give me a single row from the scenarios database, and one is give me multiple rows from the scenario options, where my scenario ID is. Now, I haven't created any of these tables yet. We will go do that very shortly. In fact, let's go do that now. So I'm going to move this to my other screen. I'm going to bring up Firefox again. I'm going to go in here. So we're going to create two tables. We're going to create the scenario table. So scenario. Oop. So, all right. So when it comes to naming conventions, there's a few different parties out there, or a few different camps, if you will. One camp says that your tables should all be singular. So the job table, the party table, the user table, the scenario table, and those tables hold scenario data. Then there's some who your tables should all be named plural. Scenarios, jobs, parties, users. It honestly doesn't matter. What's more important is that you're consistent. Because if you have jobs, parties, users, and then scenario, when you go to code, you're going to type scenarios because everything else has an S, and then you're going to wonder why your code breaks. It's just pick one and stick with it. It really doesn't matter which one you go with. I personally just happen to like multiple. I happen to like the plural. All right, so scenario ID. Let's make it primary and auto increment. All right, so we have our scenario ID. We have a user ID, which is an integer. We have a job ID, which is an integer. Now, on user ID, I also would like to add an index, and that index is just going to be a regular old index. What indexing is it's a way for MySQL or any database to know what data you want organized how. So, for example, when I do a query, so if I'm trying to retrieve data and say, give me everything with user ID 1 or user ID 2, if it doesn't have an index, it needs to do something called a full table scan. And a full table scan means it needs to go through the entire database, looking at every record to see and find the ones that have user ID 1. If you add an index, what it does is it actually stores index data in a certain way. So it adds a significant amount of storage to your actual data usage, but instead of doing a full table scan, it traverses a binary tree. So if you have, for example, 2 million rows, if you have 2 million rows and do a full table scan, you need to then, your database would normally need to go through 2 million rows to check each one of them on a full table scan. For an integer value, that probably could take 5 to 7 seconds, which if you're trying to get sub-second load time is just not acceptable. If you have an index on a field and there's 2 million records, you're looking at 0.0007 seconds. You're looking at something along the order of 32,000 records that need to get checked. So it's a significant performance gain. And since user ID is something we're going to query often, you can add indexes later. So it's actually not a huge deal, but I like to upfront add them. Okay, so we have our job ID, which we probably won't be querying. We have our description, which this we are going to use a lot. So I'm just going to see if that's long enough. So we have a description. We have a name, which is going to be 255. Why am I doing 255? 2048 should be 2047. Is if you do all data is stored in powers of 2. So if I go over that value, it has to allocate a whole nother set of bytes. So in this case, if I say 255, that allocates 256 bytes to that. If I say 257, then it has to allocate, I think, 512 bytes. So is it a huge difference? Is it going to break the bank? No. But it's you know what? It's the old school programmer in me managing my bytes. All right, so name. So we have status. Status is going to be an integer. It's going to be a number. I could probably make it a tiny int, but we're not going to have that much going on that it's going to matter. So we're going to have a date, which is going to be a date field. In fact, I don't want to call it date, so I'm going to rename that scenario date. Just because the word date is restricted. In SQL. So is scenario. So is status, I think. No. But either way, I'm gonna be more verbose on those. So it doesn't hurt to be verbose. It just means you have a little bit of extra code sometimes. And I'm okay with a little bit of extra code. All right, so we have our scenario date, and then we have options. And options are going to be in another field. Okay, so we're going to save here. It creates the table. I'm going to copy this and paste this into our SQL folder with file, which I can't see. Where is it? All right, so I'm just going to paste that in here. All right, so now we're going to need a new table, which is going to be scenario options. Fields, let's put 10, why not? So we have a scenario option ID, which is going to be unique. This will be our main, so it'll be primary auto increment. So we have a scenario ID, which is going to be an int. and that is also going to be an index because we're going to, not unique, because we are going to search for it. Okay, so we need a scenario option title, 255. Actually, I'll just description. And then scenario option result. All right, so I'm going to do something that it's a style thing. Some people hate this. Some people swear by it. I'm actually going to codify the content in here. So what I'm going to put in here is actually a JavaScript. Well, I'm probably going to use JSON, but it really doesn't matter. But I'm going to store an array value into this field. And that array value is going to tell me everything about this option. So what happens if the user picks this option? And it gives me a lot of opportunity because I can, essentially I'm writing code that sits in the database. So each value and option can be unique. And this saves me, for example, let's say I decided that every option was going to have 3 parameters, a cost, a money cost, a stat minimum. I mean, I could technically build out 100 fields and have all the different permutations, but it's just I'm just putting the code in here, so that's why I'm making this a text. Okay, so let's save this. All right, so I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put that in PHP. Okay, so now we have our 2 tables, and our 2 tables are going to do some stuff, and that's exciting. And it is 11:30, so I'm going to say that this has been a good stream. And I think we've gotten most of what we wanted to done. I didn't get everything done, but let me do a commit. So git commit. Commit and push, and push it. All right, and if anyone is interested, you can get the code. This will be up on a server for people to play as soon as it is playable. So next session, which is Friday, same time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, I will go through and finish out the scenario code. So we will go through the creation of a scenario, the actual coding of the options. We'll probably start with a single job just to get something working and something going. And once that is working, then from there we will, we will move on to the next thing. So I assume that's as far as we're going to get. So we didn't get as much done as I wanted to, but I think we covered a lot of good ground. I will stay by for about 10 minutes afterwards to answer questions in chat if anyone has them. Otherwise, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day. If you're not already following and you want to learn more about the game or coding or anything in general, please drop a follow so that you can see more in the future. And thank you very much and have a great day.